Welcome, everyone. Hello, hello. Welcome, good people. My name is Tishira Halyard, she, her pronouns. I am a Black woman with tortoise glasses and a red lip. Here today as a research coordinator for the Black Girls Equity Alliance. We are a collective impact model. We're comprised of people and organizations and systems and agencies all over Allegheny County and, in fact, Pennsylvania. And so we're happy to have you. If this is your first time here, don't be a stranger. Make sure you stick around because we do these types of webinars. We call them our She Matters webinar series every single month. It's a play on the idea, not just like what matters to Black women and families, but also, she matters. It's a reminder that we do, in fact, matter. And so we are excited for today's conversation about summary citations. If you are not new around these parts, you may have heard us speak about this in our juvenile justice meeting, previous webinars. The ACLU and Ghadah Makoshi, for example, are very, very close friends to Gwen's Girls and the BGEA. And so it's not your first time seeing her, I'm sure. But we do have other guests today that I want to introduce, so we can jump right into it, y'all. I do not want my voice to take up too much time today. We have a very meaty conversation. And so we have with us Penn Law School's ARC Clinic, and ARC stands for Advocacy for Racial and Civil Justice. We also, again, have Ghadah with us from the ACLU, and we have Allison Ware, who is part of the Allegheny County Public Defender's Office. And so we're so happy to have our colleagues with us today, our co-conspirators. I'm going to turn it over to you all. And before you speak, please just give us a sentence or two about your bio so people know more about who you are. And also, if you're joining and you want to have closed captions on, you should see the closed caption button on the bottom of your screen. For me, it is to the bottom right. Not sure where it is on your screen, but if you need support with that, please let us know and we're happy to support. Okay, so I'll kick it over to the team to start us off in our conversation about summary citations.
All right, I can start. My name is Ghadah Makoshi. I am a brown-skinned woman with brown curly hair in front of a bluish-green ACLU sign. I work for the ACLU of Pennsylvania. I am focused on youth rights, school policing, and advocacy. And I will hand it over to Allison Ware.
Thanks, Ghadah. So I'm Allison Ware. I am a white woman. I have been a juvenile public defender for almost 3 years, focusing mainly in the area of summary citations. I've done some delinquency work and some education work as well. So looking forward to being with all of you today. And I will turn it over to Cara and the ARC team.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cara McClellan. I am the director of the Advocacy for Racial and Civil Justice Clinic. I am a Black woman. I'm laughing because I normally had natural hair, but I switched it up today. So we switch it up. It's really good to see everybody, and we're so glad to be here. The ARC Justice Clinic provides students with hands-on experience working on civil rights issues. So I'm first and foremost a civil rights attorney, and students who have had 3 semesters of law school are certified legal interns in the clinic who work directly on doing trial and appellate as well as policy advocacy. So I will pass it over to 2 CLIs, and I think the first who's going to introduce herself is Holly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Jones. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman with brown, straight hair. I'm a 3rd-year law student at Penn Law and a certified legal intern in the ARC Justice Clinic working on educational equity issues like the use of summary citations in schools. And I'll pass it over to Mike.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Esparn. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a Latino man in front of a white background with brown hair. And like Holly, I'm also a 3rd-year law student in the Penn Law Advocacy for Racial and Civil Justice Clinic.
All right, so I will get us started. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so today we're talking about summary citations, and I will jump right into what a summary citation is for those that don't know. So summary citations look a lot like traffic tickets. In fact, they're called non-traffic citations, and they're issued for very minor infractions. So things like vaping, disorderly conduct, which could include obscene language, gestures. When you are issued a summary citation, they are sent in the mail. So it may take up to 2 weeks to be received, if at all. For our students and our youth who are homeless, they may never actually receive the summary citation or know that they've been issued one. And then it can again take several more weeks or months before they are required to appear before a magistrate judge. These summary citations actually have long-term consequences, and a lot of police as well as staff in schools don't seem to understand this. They think that they will just issue a citation, you appear before a magistrate, they may or may not issue you a fine, and then you just go on your way. But that is not the case. So for starters, they are adult criminal offenses. There is no distinction between juveniles or adults at the magisterial court level, as there are in arrests where youth are referred to juvenile court. They have to appear before a magisterial court judge, and they are not provided an attorney, just like they would be if they were going to juvenile court if they had been arrested. Summary citations may result in fines. This is completely up to the discretion of the magistrate. Up to $300. They can issue no fines, but they could issue several $100s if they choose to. This places a burden on families who have to pay these fines. There have been families that have talked about choosing between buying food and paying for these fines or paying for utilities. Failure to pay these fines also results in a referral to juvenile justice, and it's called a failure to comply charge, which is an additional charge in addition to the summary citation. Summary convictions are also not automatically expunged, and they can't be expunged until 6 months after turning 18, and only if all conditions have been met. So if at 17 or 18, they were applying for a job, the college, or a military application, and on the application it asks if they have ever been convicted of a crime, they must say yes. One other distinction that I don't have as a bullet point here, the difference between a citation and an arrest, is there isn't a minimum age. So in Pennsylvania, the minimum age for an arrest is 10. With a summary citation, there is no minimum age. And we have seen data and police reports that show children as young as 5 that have been issued a summary citation. So I will hand this over to Allison to talk a little bit more about her work.
Thanks, Ghadah. So our office has been representing children and youth in summary hearings for almost 3 years. We started in April of 2021. And so I just wanted to offer some examples to the group. I know that sometimes summaries can feel like, maybe something was a more serious matter and there was a favor done almost, right? We charged it at a lower level, and so it'll help the children. As Ghadah stated, most of the infractions are really minor. So 3 examples are: one was a child was playing outside with siblings and friends. They were spraying silly string at each other, and one child sprayed it at another child, missed the child, and hit a neighbor's car. The child ran home immediately, got some soap and water, came out to clean the car, and as he was approaching the car with the sponge, he was stopped by the police and cited for spraying the silly string. That silly string wipes right off. It was something that arguably I think could have really been handled in a neighborhood environment, but instead he was brought to court, and he was 10 at the time of the citation. Another child there were 2 children, they're actually Pittsburgh Public School students, that were throwing a lollipop back and forth on the bus. They were 11 and 12 years old. One child had a bad throw, as one might imagine could happen, and hit another child with the lollipop. When we went to court for the disorderly conduct for the hitting with the lollipop, the parents said, all we wanted was an apology. We don't believe that they tried to hurt our child. And so there was a real realization of this really simply could have been handled without bringing this child to court, charging them with a crime, all for something that was both a clear childhood behavior and not something that was intentional. And the third was our youngest client. He was 8 years old. He and friends were playing at a park, and he was accused of tipping over like a picnic bench at the park and damaging it. He was 8 years old. And when we went to court, he wasn't big enough to pull open the court door. And the officer was pretty insistent that he had been the one that flipped the park bench. And so we had to have a discussion of sort of his inability to pull open the door might have been evidence that he was not, in fact, strong enough to flip the park bench. So he was just a child playing in the park. He said there were big kids here that I think flipped it. All of those cases, thankfully, resulted in dismissals, but are examples of true behavior that does get children brought to court. So some of the impact and consequences of children receiving summary citations are many kids are scared of coming to court. Whether they're 8, 10, 12, or 17, court feels like a scary place and they don't know what to expect. And there's a judge that sits higher than them and the police are there, and it feels very, very unnerving to most kids. It also, I've seen many children develop a distrust of their community members or of their teachers or other school officials that come and testify against them. So you raise your voice in math class and you are charged with a summary citation. Then the math teacher comes and testifies against you and says, you raised your voice in math class or you used a curse word. And then the next day you're expected to go back to math class and have a good attitude and be a participating student. And that's really confusing for our young people. And it's confusing for them to understand, well, in this scenario, my teacher was sort of on the other side, and in the classroom now they're on my side, and that's confusing for them. There's also a lot of double punishment that goes on. Children are suspended in school or given lunch detention or something to that effect, and then they're brought to court to answer for the same sort of behavior. And so they feel as though it's happened to them twice, and they've already explained to school officials what have happened, or they've already sort of gone through the process, and then they go through it again. That's not to include when parents take away cell phones and ground them and all the normal kid things that happen when you are involved in behavior. Those also occur. And so kids have said to me on a number of occasions, I feel like I've done this before. I feel like I've made amends, for lack of a better word. One of the sort of practical difficulties of summary citations is kids are missing school and parents are missing work. And for many of our families, they can't afford for parents to miss a day of work. They can't afford to find transportation to the magistrate office. They can't, it poses this massive burden on families that we know pairs with the racial and disability discrimination that sort of permeates all of this, is that our children of color are much higher likelihood of being charged. Our students with disabilities receive citations at a much higher rate. So there's a lot of disparaging impacts that occur. And many of these are for, just as Ghadah said, very minor infractions. So Ghadah, can you flip the screen? I'm sorry, I don't know if I can. Okay, thanks. So this is just an example of a summary citation. This is what comes in the mail. So I don't know that it's personally an intuitive document for families. I don't think if I got this as a parent, having never seen it, that you would know what it is or what to expect or sort of how to proceed. And so this is the citation for the child that sprayed silly string. It was cited as purposely spraying the silly string on the car. And the neighbor was pretty egregious, but it wiped off just fine. So all is well that ends well with that child, but he was brought to court and he had to talk about the incident, and he was very scared. And the story that he told me in the hallway about how his friend moved and they shot it at the car, it was an accident, he meant to hit his friend. He became much more fearful to tell the judge when the judge was sitting up high above him and was in a black robe and the police officer was standing there. I had to help him through telling it. So if you guys can see on the screen, there's a 10 circled under his birthday with a circle. So he was only 10 when it happened. And the next slide is just our contact information. If anybody is in Allegheny County, needs assistance, that's the main line for our juvenile division and my email. Please feel free to reach out if you know of a student or a child that's facing a summary citation. And our general advice is always to plead not guilty. Families say, well, my kid did curse in math, or they did run down the hall, or they did throw the lollipop. But in many cases, these cases can be worked out for not fines and costs. And if you plead guilty, you will have to pay the costs and fines. So if we can work it out in a different way. That's always our hope. Well, our real hope is that you'll never have to be there. But if you know a family that is, please just give us a call. And on that note, I will, unless there are any questions, I will turn it over to Cara and her team.
Yeah, Allison, actually, was going to say because when you brought up this citation and at the bottom here, it says $40.25. Can you explain what would happen if somebody were to receive this and just send in a check for that $40?
Yes, thank you for the question. I'm sorry, I skipped over that part. So the $40.25 that's listed is part of the court costs. So a judge, when you enter a guilty plea, can assess you a fine anywhere from $0 to $300 on most citations. And then plus the added court costs, which depending on the magisterial district court range from $90 to about $170. And the judge doesn't have discretion over the court costs if you're found guilty. So they have, discretion over your fine. And so families are cited and then charged somewhere between $90 and $100, all the way up to about $450 per citation. And that could be money that your family's forced to pay, even for example, the lollipop throwing or the silly string. And so many families see that $40.25 and think, oh, well, for a thrown lollipop and for me to not have to miss a day of work and my child to not have to miss school and us take an Uber there, $40, I'll just pay the $40. It'll be fine. But the price is actually much higher than that. And it's not as clearly advertised, but the costs are much higher than what is initially listed. So thank you for the reminder.
I have a question, Allison, and maybe this is also a question for the rest of the panelists, but what really stood out to me on the screen with the actual copy of the citation is not just the child's age, but the idea that a 10-year-old would have any real concept of money or the value of money, and obviously any earning potential. So where does the idea of this even come from as far as a methodology of punishment or accountability? Do we know the origins of this?
Well, so my response to that would be, and maybe the other panelists have a different perspective, but summary citations are adult charges. So I think in the same way that we've often punished adults, as if adults, have this plethora of money, that there isn't sort of another mechanism that adapts to the fact that these children are 13, or that they're children at all, or that they're families of poverty. There's nothing sort of written into that, but because they're adult tickets, it's almost in the same way as when Ghadah started. She said that like a speeding ticket, if you're speeding and you get the ticket, and it's either you can pay the $100 or you can go to court. This sort of operates in the same way. It doesn't account for the child. And we have run into problems with magistrates where if a child is found guilty before we're involved and they're assessed money, there's supposed to be what's called a payment determination hearing that determines what that child can pay, not what their families can pay. So if a child is 12, 13, 14, or even younger, they can't even get a job. So if we were to say, you broke a window, for example, right? There's an actual monetary need of a person to have that repaid. The child has no earning potential. And many magistrates find themselves in a position where they don't want to say the child can't pay, because then the person is out their money for the window, but the child and the family can't pay. So then it does fall on the family and it falls on the child. And then often it is a failure to comply because the family doesn't have the money. But there is, in my opinion, no mechanism that accounts for them being children. There is supposed to be a hearing that determines their ability to pay, but I would say that I have not seen true success. I've seen it in a couple of districts. I saw one magistrate who had a child trade, I think it was their like school attendance. Like if they went to school, like every week that they went to school perfectly, he took $25 off of the total. And so I don't love that, but it's better than asking a family to pay money that they don't have because the child had to go to school anyway. But I don't think there's a good answer to say how we've accounted for the fact that they're children. I think because it's an adult process in an adult system, we are treating them like adults and like adults with earning potential.
Thank you, Allison. And just a reminder, folks, please do drop any questions in the chat or the Q&A box.
So I'll just, first of all, thank you, Ghadah. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Gwen's girls. It's so, really such an honor for us to be a part of this conversation. I think the last question, really on a big picture, draws to mind for me research that's come out of Georgetown University about the adultification of Black children. In particular, their research has focused on the adultification of Black girls. But we're seeing this in summary citations. It goes exactly to what Allison's describing, the criminalization of Black childhood, and the willingness to apply adult criminal charges to normal childhood behavior. This research really talks about how because of implicit and other kinds of racial bias, there is a willingness of adults to see Black children as older than they are, as less deserving of nurturing and support, and as more likely to be guilty and deserving of punishment. So this is part of a broader national phenomenon we're seeing in terms of the school to prison pipeline, but it plays out in very specific ways when we think about summary citations and the racial disparities. So we all, I think, feel very strongly that this is a racial justice issue when you look at who is being impacted, but also the differential treatment in terms of how student behavior is being classified as an offense, not just an offense under the code of conduct, but as, again, an adult criminal offense as a summary citation. And so that's the reason when Ghadah and others at the ACLU of Pennsylvania reached out to us, we felt it was clearly in line with the mission of our clinic. Again, we are the Advocacy for Racial and Civil Justice Clinic. We do civil rights advocacy, but we do targeted impact advocacy that's focused on supporting a grassroots movement for racial justice. And so ending the criminalization of Black children and stopping the school to prison pipeline is a major focus of our work. So I'm going to pass it over again to Holly and Mike to speak more about the work we've been doing with the ACLU of Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh.
Thank you, Professor McClellan, for that introduction. You can probably go to the next slide. So we were invited by the ACLU of PA, as Professor McClellan noted, to partner on ending the use of summary citations in the Pittsburgh Public School District. Specifically, that's because there are these stark disparities based on race and disability in the use of summary citations in the Pittsburgh Public School District. On the slide you're seeing, there are a few of the egregious statistics that you can see. So Black students are 12 times more likely to receive a summary citation than white students. Black girls are 24 times more likely to receive a summary citation than white girls. Black boys with disabilities are the most likely to receive a summary citation. And in the past decade, 80% of students have been referred to the police have been Black consistently over the past decade. And that's compared to there being about 50% Black students in the Pittsburgh Public School District. So these statistics are not just shocking, but they're also showing violations of the law. Students have the right to be free from discriminatory discipline based on race under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. And Pittsburgh has consistently failed to protect their Black students from discrimination, not only in the issuance of summary citations, but across all forms of school discipline.
And to follow up on the points that Holly just shared, the good news with all of this is that there has been a groundswell of community organizing around this issue. So the good news is that Gwen's Girls, Black Girls Equity Alliance, ACLU of Pennsylvania, 412 Justice have been organizing around this issue of summary citations. Once these disparities have been highlighted, they've been pushing the school district to remove the use of summary citations from their discipline practices and procedures, and that resulted in sending of a demand letter to the school district. So then what happened at the start of the school year was that the school district decided to issue a moratorium on the use of summary citations in Pittsburgh Public Schools specifically. And so what does a moratorium mean? That means that there was a pause on the use of summary citations in Pittsburgh Public Schools. That moratorium was originally supposed to last until the end of November. And then last week, the Board of Education voted to extend the moratorium until the end of January, so until January 29th. So what does that practically mean? That means that from the start of this school year now until the end of January, students in Pittsburgh should not have been receiving summer citations. And now what we're pushing for through the Penn Law Arc Justice Clinic and along with ACLU Pennsylvania, Gwen's Girls and other partners, 412 Justice, is to make that moratorium permanent so that students don't ever receive summer citations again in Pittsburgh in the future. And also the goal is that if Pittsburgh changes its summer citations procedures, that other school districts in Allegheny County where summer citations are continuing to be issued also really reconsider their use of summer citations and hopefully also put an end to the use of citations in their school districts as well. And I'll just add to, before moving on to the next slide, is that the school district only decided to issue this moratorium and now to extend it after community organizing, after groups like Gwen's Girls and ACLU Pennsylvania came together to highlight this issue and to call for a moratorium and hopefully also the permanent ending of the use of summer citations, because again, there are such stark disparities, right? And when Allison spoke about how if you don't pay the fee or the fine that you're originally issued along with your summer citation, or if you don't go to the hearing before the magistrate judge, that means that you can get referred to juvenile court, and then you have to find another lawyer, and you have to go to court more often, and it's just cascading consequences and more undue burdens on families, and specifically families of color and low-income families. So this shouldn't be happening in the first place, but then we consider everything that happened from it. And then maybe we can move to the next slide. And I think we might be getting some background noise.
Sounds good.
One moment, Michael. Just a quick reminder to everyone to please make sure you are muted. Thank you.
And then I'll just follow up and say that this semester the clinic has really been looking at summer citations and doing research and putting together materials. And part of that work has been creating a parent survey or a student survey. It's there up on the screen now. If you take I think if you use the camera on your phone and try to take a picture of that image on the right side of your screen, it'll take you right to the survey, but also I can put a link to the survey in the chat. And basically what the survey is just a way to get in touch with all of us. So even though I said, like, you know, ever since the start of this school year, students in Pittsburgh should not have been receiving summer citations because of the moratorium. But if you know of students who have been receiving citations this year, even though the moratorium has been in place, we would definitely be interested in getting in touch with them. But then also, even if you know of students or parents who have been affected by citations in previous school years, we'd also be interested in getting in touch with them. So please either fill out the survey yourself or share with your network, share with people that you know of. And we can definitely follow up with them. We receive an automatic response when a survey has been filled out, so we should be able to get in touch with them pretty soon. But if not, also, I believe our emails are right there on the left side of the screen, and then also Ghadah's contact information is there. If you'd like to get in touch with any of us, we've been doing a lot of work on this, and hopefully we're going to continue to work on this so that there is a permanent end to the use of summer citations in Pittsburgh, and hopefully that leads to a domino effect for other school districts in Allegheny County, because again, even though the disparities are especially stark in Pittsburgh in relation to Black students receiving these disproportionately, we know that's not just confined to Pittsburgh Public Schools, but also is happening in other places across Allegheny County and also in Pennsylvania more broadly. And I think that's everything from me on this slide.
I'm going to leave this up for just 1 minute, but I also do want to clarify with summary citations. So truancy is a type of summary citation, but it is not the focus of the work that we are doing. So the summary citations that we are focused on that we have talked about today is for disciplinary measures. So as a result of behavior, not as a result of compulsory attendance, which is also a summary citation, but totally separate from the work that we are doing. So just to clarify that.
Thank you, Ghadah. And we have a few questions in the chat. The first one is from Emily, who says, are there states, cities, districts that don't allow citations to be written for school offenses that we can look to? as we advocate. And it actually might be in the reverse, because before doing work in Allegheny County, I didn't even know that this was a possibility. So it may be easier to situate how common this is among jurisdictions.
Yes, there are certainly places that don't do it. So my understanding is, if we're talking about school districts, one close to us, Philadelphia School District, my understanding is they do not issue summary citations at all. Neither do all school districts in Pennsylvania, right? The school police are the employees of a school district, and the school district itself has some say in what their employees are and aren't allowed to do. So if there are school police that work for the district, they have some say in what they are allowed and not allowed to do. In terms of limiting city police, that is not within their jurisdiction. But yes, absolutely, there are school districts that do not issue summary citations. Illinois, I think somebody, mentioned that here too. ProPublica did a very great series of reports on Illinois too that captures the use of summary citations and fines.
And also, just to state and reinforce the obvious, right? Pittsburgh School District has not issued summary citations this school year, and lo and behold, the world has not fallen apart. So if we need data points on, you don't have to use adult criminal sanctions to make sure that there is order and that students can learn, we have it right here in Pittsburgh at this point, because there have not been summary citations and students have been continuing to come to school and learn.
And thank you for that, Professor. So just to be clear, because I think this is new for a lot of people, and for me, I still get very confused about how these citations are used. So one more time for the audience, tell us what happens when these citations are not paid, when there is a failure to comply, as you all mentioned.
So it will differ depending on the county. So Allegheny County has made a lot of progress over the years, where failure to comply is usually sent back and it's not actually escalated to juvenile justice. And Allison can probably talk a little bit more about that, but that is not the same in every county. So for other counties, if the family really fails to pay, then they get charged with failure to comply. They get referred to juvenile justice. They now have to go to juvenile court. And I think there can also be, Allison, maybe you can correct me here, but there can also be a warrant issued.
So the magistrates issue a warrant, and I use the word warrant loosely because I have yet to see one of my clients admittedly brought into a magistrate court for a failure to pay. Usually what it is they issue a warrant so that the family comes, and then they have one of the payment determination hearings that I was talking about, where the judge will say, hey, you owe this amount of money, you haven't paid, like, what can we do about that? The referrals to juvenile court, we have made progress. So it's not, many kids that are brought in on a failure to pay don't see a judge, but they do get a probation officer that they have to work with, that checks in with them, that does all of that with them. And further, should that child get a juvenile court allegation down the line, it is one of the first lines in their report. This child had X number of failure to comply allegations, which reads to a juvenile court judge as if these kids have been out here causing, right? Like failure to comply indicates they've done something wrong 4 times, rather than their family didn't have the money to pay for them flipping the park bench or tossing a lollipop on the bus. So we have made progress in the sense that the kids don't always see a judge, but we're still working on the fact that A, it's being utilized against them when their families are in poverty, that B, they get a probation officer and are on probation, and that it can be used against them in the future should they have another sort of situation.
Thank you too for that. I mean, it speaks back to what my art colleagues were talking about regarding the criminalization of childhood. And I'm also thinking about the criminalization of poverty as well. Would you all like to respond in any way about failure to comply, or what happens if these citations are not paid?
I can start off by just saying that I think it puts families in in an especially precarious position, because I think when you get the citation, when you get the, it looks like a ticket, you think that if you just pay, they'll be fine. But also to Allison's point, that sort of is admitting guilt and sort of saying that you did do something wrong. But in a lot of these circumstances, again, the student is just engaging in childhood behavior. It's just normal behavior. But the issue comes in when it's being applied disproportionately to Black students and to students of color. When the majority of students who receive the citations are students of color and are Black students, that's when I think the issue comes, because those are the students that then have this offense in their record, that when they're applying for jobs, when they're applying to colleges, that legacy of that citation when they were 10 or 11 years old, that continues and that stays with them for years after the original incident that caused them to receive the citation. So I think that's the issue too when it comes to who is actually receiving these citations. It is students of color. It is often low-income students. And so when there are additional consequences that come with not paying that fee, again, I think it's a domino effect. And that's when we really see the school to prison pipeline happening in real time.
Thank you, Michael. So I think you just answered Pam's question, which was, do summary charges or citations, I think she means, have to be reported on applications for college, military jobs, and housing? I'm seeing you all nod your head. Yes. So this goes back to this following.
Yeah, I was typing it in, but yes, if they plead or are found guilty, not if it's dismissed, withdrawn, or found not guilty, right? But otherwise, they would have to, if it says, have you ever been convicted of a criminal offense, then you would say yes. Again, and this could just be for vaping. It could be for, throwing a lollipop.
But the citation is not criminal. I thought it came through the civil system.
It comes through the criminal system. It is the same as if one of us was charged with, as adults, if we were charged with throwing a lollipop or a non-traffic citation. I can also tell you that many of our families that are transient or homeless or moving frequently don't get the mail that issued them a summary citation. So then they don't show up to the hearing. They're found guilty in absentia. Then they don't pay the fine because they don't know they have the fine. And then the child goes to report somewhere, apply for a job, do something, and they say, no, I haven't been convicted of a crime. And they do a background check, and lo and behold, they say, yes, you have. And the family never knew. Or the first time they find out is when they get the call from the probation officer that says you haven't paid your fine. And I've gotten a couple of calls from families that say, do you know this person? This feels like a scam. Because reasonably, a family would say, do you owe us money because you didn't show up to a court hearing. It could sound like someone's trying to just take money from you. So yeah, that's also a secondary problem.
Thank you, Allison. And I see that Ghadah responded to Melissa's question in the chat, but I just want to elevate it for everyone on the call in case there is someone else who has information about this. Melissa asks, would the Juvenile Justice Reform House bill that was introduced by Mount Lebanon Representative Dan Miller, who is a former public defender, address the use of summary citations at all, or either House Bill 1708, which I believe is the one that is in response to the Juvenile Justice Task Force that was issued by the governor of Pennsylvania. So between legislation, is there anything coming down the pipeline that could make some changes statewide on this issue? Is anyone aware of?
Okay. The information I have on that is that it would remove failure to comply. So if they don't pay, then there's not that secondary step. But as far as children being charged in that system, then it's still, but we've eliminated the juvenile court jurisdiction. It would eliminate juvenile court jurisdiction for failure to comply.
Let's see. So someone wants to know about work on this issue being done outside of Allegheny County, or what we know about other jurisdictions. Maybe the clinic can answer that.
Yes, I was going to say, last year, the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights found in Victor Valley, California, it's a school district in Southern California that also it used a similar law enforcement citation program to discipline students, that school district was in violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act because it issued citations more harshly, more frequently to Black students. And I'll put a link to that in the chat. So I think this goes back to Emily's question earlier, that Allegheny County and school districts in Allegheny County and Pittsburgh Public Schools don't have to use summer citations, right? And the Department of Education has already found other school districts who use similar programs to discipline the students, that those programs violated Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So I'll put a link to that in the chat, but I think that's an important point, that Pittsburgh and Allegheny County more broadly don't have to use summer citations. There are other ways to respond to incidents in school without using law enforcement citations disproportionately against Black students. So I'll put that agreement in the chat as well.
Thank you, Michael. And Melissa had a follow-up question about whether or not the charges / non-payment of the citations result in suspension of driver's license. Is that something that you all have seen?
Someone else may have a better answer on this. But I know that for truancy, which I know is not exactly what we're talking about, that can impact a driver's license. I also know that things such as like public intoxication or like those citations that center around alcohol or vaping, they can have an impact on driver's license, but we fortunately have not had a case involving those get far enough for it to impact, although I know that they can, but we've fortunately been able to handle them before they get to the level of impacting somebody's driver's license. But somebody may have a better answer than me.
Thank you, Allison. I have a question about how much is actually being collected. We see this in juvenile court fees and fines, that in jurisdictions across the country, more money is spent by the courts attempting to collect the fees and fines than it's actually being collected. So I'm wondering, do we have data on how much is actually being collected and the resources that are being expended to collect them?
Not the resources being expended to collect them. So I will say that I don't have a final answer because I just received this data. But yes, I did get statewide data on the fees and fines that have been assessed on youth between 2018 and 2022. So once I finish analyzing that, because I just got it last week, I can provide a better answer on how much youth are being charged across the state.
Thank you. Got another question. Emily says, I've been in a meeting where both Pittsburgh juvenile probation officers and a local magistrate insisted that children need to be in the system and under probation to get help and support. Can anyone speak to this?
Allison might also be able to speak to this, but I feel like this has been an ongoing thing that I have heard, for years and years, and I'm sure is not unfamiliar to people who have been a part of the Black Girls Equity Alliance, is that we hear that often, is that a child needs to be referred to juvenile justice, or they need to be sent to the magistrate, because that's where all of the assistance is. They'll get them the help and the support that they need, that the only way that they can get it is by being put into this system, which is not true.
Yeah, so to piggyback off of Ghadah, I have strong opinions about this, and I hear it at least once a week from a magistrate, from a school, from somebody who says, if this kid, I'm not getting rid of this case because we need this kid here, or XYZ will happen. There's no service available in juvenile court or in the magistrate that is not available to a family outside of the system. They are all the same services. All it comes with is a judge and a lawyer and a probation officer. Those are the things that you get that you don't have outside of the system. Is I suppose you have a probation officer but to me that's not they're not a service. They're just a person. In the same way that saying you get a lawyer, we're not a service, we're a person. So there is no service available to children in the system that are not available to children outside of the system. So I think yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to help these kids without the system, because there's nothing new available to them when they come into it.
Yeah, so like courts don't have a magic wand is what you're saying,
No,
Alex.
not a magic wand, not a special wait list, not a special anything, not extra support and therapy that we can get them. It's all the exact same stuff. You'd go on the exact same wait list, the exact same programs as kids who are not court involved.
Thank you for that. Cara?
I was just going to say also, just to underscore the costs that come when we try to repackage what are really counseling or social service needs, as you know,
I can't tell if it's my computer or are we
term, folks saying, we need surveillance. Same there is, for example, if you have a conversation with an officer, just because they are someone who can be able to provide supports doesn't.
Here, okay, we lost Cara, unfortunately.
Sorry, Cara, it was breaking up.
Okay. But Ghadah, can you just mention what you dropped into the chat just now? Because I think that's an excellent point.
Oh, well, I was just kind of piggybacking off of what Allison said, is that not only is there no magic wand or magic resources, but that in fact, kids are probably going to need more support and more therapy as a result of the trauma of going through the juvenile and criminal court systems. So if anything, it does a lot more harm than it does benefit them.
And we hear often, for example, the role that juvenile probation might have in a young person's life, and they may have a great relationship with their probation officer, but it does not mean that JPO is writ large a service provider. That is not their job. And so it is important to note the services that do exist in the community that are meant to provide supports for families and for young people. One of those being, it's now time for the Caring Connections for Youth commercial during this webinar. So we say that Caring Connections for Youth exists just for times as this. If you were in the community and you were trying to figure out how to get the family or a family the help that they need, we do not need to call 911 for issues that are non-safety related or to get law enforcement involved. Instead, we call 211 in order for Caring Connections to be able to kind of triage and to, goal map the community-based services that family needs. So, Cara, you're back with us though, so please finish your point. We caught probably just like 10% of it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize my Wi-Fi was going out, but I think you all said it better than I could. I was just saying that we don't need criminal justice responses for social and emotional needs, and that even if the juvenile justice system or other criminal justice services can be provided, it comes with the cost of surveillance and, at the end of the day, punitive sanctions that come with missteps. And so really trying to ensure that surveillance doesn't come with needed resources is critical for protecting our youth and our families.
Thank you. I mean, again, to your point, we're talking about disrupting a pipeline here. And the criminal legal system should not be confused with a social safety net, even when it comes down to young people. Those are very different things. So
Shira, I just wanted to point out something that you had said. So you had brought up something about they might have a good relationship with their probation officer. And then the same thing is talked about in schools where they might have a good relationship with the police officer as well. But I think what people fail to consider is that these people can also take criminal action against the children if they were to confide in them. If you were to confide about an incident that you didn't think was a crime because you were a teenager and you were just out joyriding, for example, well, then you can be charged by that police officer who you thought was your friend or, somebody that you could confide in, which is the difference between having a social worker at school that a child can go to.
Yeah, thank you for that. distinction. And also we got from Pam Harbin in the chat, who says that she will post Pittsburgh Public School 2022 to 23 school year citation data tomorrow on her Facebook page. So you all make sure to look out for that. And also Sarah Nevels has dropped into the chat the Caring Connections flyer, it looks like, just to give other examples of the services that they provide. To spell those out more, please download that and share it widely. I think it was the team at ARC who mentioned that we see disparities across all forms of school discipline, and that summary citations was just one area. For ARC, what else are you tracking? What else should this audience know about, specifically as it relates to Black girls?
We're also looking at suspensions and expulsions and other forms of school-involved discipline in the Pittsburgh Public School District. I have some of the statistics for those here as well. Black students are receiving about 75% of all in-school suspensions, 77% of out-of-school suspensions, and 78% of expulsions. So it tracks a similar disparity as in these summary citation cases.
My goodness, that is overwhelming. Any other questions, please do drop them in the chat while you all are doing that. Ghadah, please let us know, how is it that we can get involved and remain involved in this issue as a coalition?
So one way is certainly to speak at the public hearing. Even though a moratorium was extended for 60 days, that does not mean that they are planning to get rid of summary citations. So more active involvement, speaking at public hearings or emailing your board members to let them know that there are more effective alternatives and that this is not a disciplinary measure that should be used in schools.
Thank you for that. And Melissa says, do you know of a central source for information on, for example, I guess school board members or other politicians, their views on school discipline and JJ reforms?
You mean someplace that like consolidates all that information so that you know where
your elected or people who are running for elected office stand?
I don't think there's any central, like a database or anything that people are tracking as a whole. I mean, I might be wrong, but I don't think there is unless somebody else knows of one.
Well, I think Melissa just gave herself a job in retirement. I mean, I think seems like a very easy, easy and fulfilling lift, Melissa. The BGEA is behind you, friend.
Yeah, I was just gonna say somebody needs to do that. That would be a useful service. People need to vote and pay attention to these things, because often school board elections and that type of thing, nobody pays attention. So I'm not in the city of Pittsburgh or even Allegheny County, but pay attention to what people say, because believe them.
Absolutely. Sarah Nevels, before we wrap up, I want to turn to all of our panelists to give a few last words. But before we wrap up, can I just pitch it to you to say a bit more about Caring Connections?
Yes, so Caring Connections is a fairly new, started in January, pre-arrest, pre-diversion program. It is for all youth in Allegheny County under the age of 18. Again, we sit in that space prior to and instead of criminalizing young people's behavior. We are not a crisis response. You can contact us any number of the ways that are on the top of my screen, but also what I sent out. That includes, as Tashira had mentioned, 211 option number 3, which is the United Way 24-hour centralized intake number. And then also the 231 number. Chat now, text now, and our website are all available on Gwen's Girls, referral form are all available on Gwen's Girls website, Caring Connections for Youth website, as well as United Way's website. Anyone can refer. So a family can refer themselves, a young person can refer themselves, a youth serving agency, schools, police, anyone can refer. When a referral is sent, we immediately, or as immediately as possible, connect with that family, have a conversation, a very strength-based, a very shared power conversation about what are the things that are going on for you and your young person. What does success look like? Not what does everybody say you need to fix, but what does success look like for you and your family and your young person? What are some of the resources that you wish you had? What are some of the things that you've tried in the past? What has worked? What has not? And then we kind of brainstorm as a team with the family. And then the community-based resource coordinators go back to the office as a team, case consulting as an entire team, sort of research what resources the family identified that they would like to have. And then we go back to the family with almost a portfolio of resources and allow them to select the resources that they think are most appropriate. And then we help make those connections. What we find often is that Allegheny County is rich in resources, but families don't always know where to turn, who to ask, who to call, or what to say when they do. And then they have oftentimes been shut down or passed to the next person, or, oh, I'm sorry, we don't do that, and then not provided with anything, follow up or further. And that is frustrating for families. That is disheartening for families and discouraging, especially when you're in the middle of a crisis. So we kind of help do all of that for them and with them so that they don't have to deal with that frustration and they don't have to navigate our systems, which can be hard to navigate. And then once we help make those connections, we sort of step back and just hang on with the family for a little bit to make sure everything is in place, everything that they needed, things are stabilizing. And then we stay connected with the family for an entire year to make sure periodically we check in to make sure everything is going well.
Thank you, Sarah, so much. And again, much of Caring Connections, at least the ideation, came from a need that we saw as a Black Girls Equity Alliance. And so we're very proud of the work that is being done and will continue to be done. I'm going to turn it over to you all for final thoughts. And my final thought and takeaway from all of this is just the sheer amount of anti-Black racism and paternalism that exists in the response of these adult citations that are being distributed to young people. There is a criminalization, I think, on display here, not just of childhood, but also of poverty and families. And I think it's really hard to deny that when we think about issuing a 10-year-old a citation for throwing a lollipop. So I would highly recommend folks tune in to a podcast by Serial that I listened to recently called Kids of Rutherford County that talks just about like the court and the criminal legal system's overreach into the lives of Black children and their families. But Ghadah, kick us off, please, with final thoughts.
I don't have much more to add. I put it in the chat, so I will hand it off to everyone else to comment.
Thank you. Allison?
I second Ghadah. I don't know that there's much more to say about it, but I appreciate you all being here and listening to us. And I know that everybody on this panel is happy to help if you know a young person that's involved with a citation, whether it's filling out the survey, needing guidance. I know that any of us, I think I can speak for my fellow panelists, are here to help and assist families, because while we want them to end and to go away, we have to live in the middle ground until we're there. So if there's any way that we can help, please let us know.
Thank you, Allison, and our colleagues at the ARC Clinic. Final thoughts.
I'll just jump in and say that as we discussed today, I think this is an issue that is intersectional. It crosses across racial justice and economic justice. And I think, like many of us, we didn't know about this issue until someone told us about it. So I'd encourage all of you to, if you can, get in touch with other parents, get in touch with students, with the school board, with teachers, with other people that you know. Because again, I think slowly but surely people are starting to learn about summary citations and what exactly they are, but it really is confusing, especially at the start, to sort of get your arms around it. So as much as you can to inform people about what's been going on, and please refer them to the survey link so that we can follow up with them also.
I'll just say very briefly, thank you to Black Girls Equity Alliance.
I think you are muted.
I am so sorry. You would think that all these years into Zoom, I wouldn't still be struggling with it, but my Wi-Fi has just been horrible. I'll be super brief. I just wanted to say thank you to Tashira. Thank you to Black Girls Equity Alliance. We cannot do this work without people coming forward in terms of challenging the systemic inequities. So please do, if you have been impacted by summary citations or disciplinary actions, please do fill out the survey, reach out to us, and just thank you everybody to the advocacy and for coming forward to speak out on this.
Thank you, Cara. Holly, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just echo what everyone has said. You know, summary citations are part of this much broader pattern of anti-Black racism in schools and in discipline and in the criminalization of Black students. So if you've ever experienced something like that, especially in the Pittsburgh Public School District, please reach out to us. We're looking to challenge this from multiple different angles. So as much as we can support you, please let us know.
Thank you, Holly. And many thanks to you all. Our all BGEA meeting is the Monday, December 4th from 2 to 5 p.m. Amy has dropped the registration link in the chat. We would love to see you there. As a matter of fact, don't meet us there, beat us there. I have a lot of like Black church in me. So do not meet us there, beat us there, because this is your time to weigh in on the new direction of the Black Girls Equity Alliance, what our goals will be for next year, and how we are going to be attacking issues such as this. We believe silence is a form of assent, and so our voices will be heard very loudly across Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, and the country. So thank you to our panelists for joining, and we will see you all very, very soon. Bye, everyone.